Hey, I see you. I know what it's like to feel like you're doing everything right, yet nothing seems to be working. You pray. You push forward. You hold on. But instead of breakthroughs, all you get is silence. Instead of open doors, all you see are walls. But what if this isn't the end? What if this waiting, this confusion, this storm, is actually preparation? Before God gives you something big, He prepares you for it. And that preparation, it doesn't always feel like a blessing. Sometimes, it looks like loss. Sometimes, it looks like isolation. But if you pay attention, you'll see the signs. Stay with me. Because today, I'm going to walk you through 5 undeniable signs that God is getting you ready for something greater. And as you hear the stories of Sarah, Marcus, and Daniel, you might just recognize your own journey in theirs. If this message speaks to you, share this video. Someone out there is praying for a sign, and you might be the one to deliver it. And don't forget to subscribe, because here at Grace Bible Stories, we're on this journey together. Sign number 1, everything falls apart. Sarah sits at her desk, staring at an email. Her company has let her go. The screen blurs as tears fill her eyes. She drops her head into her hands, whispering, "Why is this happening to me?" When it feels like your life is falling apart. You know that feeling, don't you? That heavy weight in your chest, like something pressing down, making it hard to breathe. One moment, everything seems fine. You have a plan. You've worked hard. You've done everything right. And then, just like that, it all crumbles. Maybe it's the job you thought was secure, the relationship you believed would last, the dream you poured years into. And now, you're standing in the wreckage, looking around, wondering, what did I do wrong? But what if I told you, this isn't a punishment? What if I told you, this is the first sign that something bigger is coming? The breaking before the blessing. Before God takes you to the next level, He often removes what no longer serves you. And let's be honest, it doesn't feel good. It feels like loss. It feels like failure. But think about this. If what you lost was truly meant for you, would it have been so easily taken away? Sarah thought she had it all figured out. She had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, sacrificing time, energy, and even precious moments with her family just to secure her position. And then, with one email, it was gone. The title, the paycheck, the security vanished in an instant. You might be in that place right now, feeling like everything you've built is slipping through your fingers. But let me ask you, if Sarah's job was truly part of God's plan for her, would it have disappeared so easily? The story of Joseph, from the pit to the palace. Sarah's story isn't new. It's been happening for generations, even in the Bible. Think about Joseph. He was his father's favorite son, had dreams of greatness, and a clear vision for his future. But then, his own brothers betrayed him. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and later wrongfully imprisoned. If Joseph had judged his future based on his circumstances, he would have given up. He would have assumed God had abandoned him. But what he didn't see, what you might not see right now, is that every setback was actually positioning him for something greater. Had Joseph never been betrayed, he wouldn't have ended up in Egypt. Had he never been in prison, he wouldn't have stood before Pharaoh. And had he never stood before Pharaoh, he wouldn't have become second in command over an entire nation, saving thousands from famine, including the very brothers who once betrayed him. The pit wasn't his end. It was his beginning. A new perspective. What about you? I know this is hard. When you're in the middle of the storm, it's easy to focus on what you've lost and not what's coming. But let me challenge you to shift your perspective. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What is God making room for in my life?" Instead of saying, "I lost everything," try saying, "I'm being prepared for something greater." Because here's the truth, every single person who ever stepped into their destiny had to first walk through a season of breaking. But that breaking was never the end of their story. And it's not the end of yours either. Sarah didn't know that losing her job was actually setting her free. Joseph didn't know that betrayal was actually setting him up for purpose. And right now, you might not realize that what feels like loss is actually positioning you for something greater. So, tell me, have you ever been in a moment where everything felt like it was falling apart? Are you in that moment right now? Drop a comment if this spoke to you. Because you're not alone. And this is just the beginning. Sign number 2, God seems silent. Daniel knelt beside his bed, eyes closed, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. "God, I need you," he whispered. The room was still, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on his nightstand. Days turned into weeks. No answers. No open doors. No sign that God was even listening. He let out a slow, shaky breath. "God, where are you?" When heaven feels quiet. You've been there, haven't you? Praying with everything in you, waiting for a sign, a whisper, anything. But instead, all you get is silence. It feels like standing in an empty room, shouting into the void, hoping, begging for an answer. But nothing comes. And that silence? It's deafening. Maybe you've been seeking direction, but every door seems to close. Maybe you've been asking for healing, but the pain lingers. Or maybe, like Daniel, you just want to know that God hasn't forgotten about you. But what if I told you that silence doesn't mean absence? What if I told you that this season, this quiet, uncertain, agonizing season, isn't God ignoring you, but refining you? The silence before the resurrection. Think about Jesus, the Son of God, performing miracles, healing the sick, raising the dead, only to be betrayed, arrested, and crucified. His followers, the ones who had walked beside him, watched in shock as he took his final breath. And then, silence. 3 days of nothing. 3 days of unanswered prayers. 3 days where it must have felt like God had abandoned them. But what they didn't know was that in the silence, God was setting the stage for the greatest comeback in history. When Jesus walked out of that tomb, everything changed. The silence wasn't proof of God's absence. It was proof that something powerful was happening behind the scenes. And the same goes for you. What if the silence is an invitation? What if, instead of seeing God's silence as rejection, you started seeing it as preparation? What if, instead of assuming he's distant, you leaned in closer? Because here's the thing, faith isn't just about trusting God when you hear him. It's about trusting him when you don't. Daniel didn't know why every opportunity kept slipping through his fingers. He applied for jobs. He networked. He prayed. And yet, nothing. The waiting felt unbearable. But what he couldn't see was that God wasn't withholding from him, he was redirecting him. Had Daniel rushed ahead, taken any opportunity just to escape the waiting, he would have missed the right one. The one that aligned with his true calling. The one that would change his entire future. Sometimes, the silence isn't a no. It's a not yet. What do you do in the silence? If you're in this season right now, you might be asking, what am I supposed to do while I wait? Keep showing up. Keep trusting. Keep believing. Jesus didn't stay in the tomb. The silence ended. the breakthrough came. And yours will too. But until then, don't let the silence convince you that God isn't there. Because right now, even if you can't hear Him, He's working. And if you trust Him through the silence, you just might find that when He speaks again, it will change everything. So tell me, have you ever felt like Daniel? Have you ever asked, God, where are you? Drop a comment if you're in this season. And if you're still holding on to faith, even when it's hard, type, I trust you, Lord. Sign number 3, you are called to let go of something. Marcus sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, an old shoebox resting on his lap. Inside, photographs, love letters, and keepsakes from a past life, a life he had spent years trying to hold on to. His fingers traced the edges of a picture, his wedding day, frozen in time. He had been staring at these memories for hours, lost in the ache of what once was. He knew what he had to do. But knowing and doing were two different things. Letting go isn't just about releasing something from your hands. It's about releasing it from your heart. The weight of holding on. Have you ever held on to something long after it was meant to go? Maybe it was a relationship, a dream, or even an identity you once had. And deep down, you knew it wasn't right for you anymore. You knew God was calling you forward, but you kept looking back. Because moving on feels like losing a piece of yourself. Marcus knew his marriage had ended long ago. The divorce papers were signed. The house had been sold. But in his heart, he was still standing in the past, replaying old memories like a movie he couldn't turn off. And isn't that what we do? We cling to what's familiar, even when it's hurting us. We hold on to people who have already let us go. We grip tightly to the way things used to be, terrified of what life will look like without them. But here's the truth, God cannot give you something new while your hands are full of the old. Abraham's ultimate test. This isn't a new struggle. Even in the Bible, some of the greatest blessings came only after an act of surrender. Abraham had waited his entire life for a son. Isaac was the fulfillment of a promise, a miracle in human form. And yet, one day, God asked him to let go. To take Isaac up a mountain and lay him on the altar. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? The son he had prayed for. The child he had waited for. And now, God was asking for him back. It made no sense. But Abraham didn't resist. He didn't bargain or beg. He simply trusted. And in the final moment, when his hands were trembling and his heart was breaking, God provided a way out. Isaac was never meant to be taken, only surrendered. Because sometimes, God isn't asking you to lose something. He's asking you to trust Him with it. What if letting go is actually gaining? What if holding on is the very thing keeping you stuck? What if the relationship that ended wasn't meant to continue? What if the job that slipped away wasn't part of God's plan? What if the dream you've been clinging to is too small for the life God has prepared for you? Marcus finally placed the photos back in the box. This time, though, he wasn't putting them away to revisit later. He was closing a chapter. Because moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. It means making room for what's next. And maybe that's what God is calling you to do. What are you still holding on to? Letting go doesn't mean losing. It means trusting. It means believing that if God is asking you to release something, it's because He has something greater in store. Marcus didn't know it yet, but freedom was waiting on the other side of surrender. And maybe yours is too. So, what is God asking you to let go of? What are you still holding on to that might be holding you back? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes, the first step to letting go is simply admitting that it's time. Sign number 4, you face unexpected opposition. Marcus sat in his car outside the job interview, gripping the steering wheel, his heart still racing. He had prepared. He had prayed. He had walked into that room with confidence. But now, all he had was a rejection. Again. His phone buzzed. It was his landlord. The same conversation he had been dreading. "Marcus, if I don't get the rent by next week, I have no choice but to move forward with the eviction." He closed his eyes, swallowing the frustration rising in his throat. Why did it feel like every step forward came with 2 steps back? When life feels like one battle after another. You know that feeling, don't you? Just when you think things are finally turning around, another obstacle shows up. You start making progress, and suddenly, everything seems to push against you. It's exhausting. It's discouraging. And if you're not careful, it can make you wonder if you should even keep going. Marcus had been fighting for so long, and for what? To keep running in circles? To keep knocking on doors that never opened? But what if I told you this opposition isn't proof that you're off track? What if it's actually proof that you're closer than ever to a breakthrough? David's battle before the crown. Think about David. Before he became king, before he walked in his purpose, he spent years in battle. Not just against Goliath, but against rejection, fear, and even his own people. God had already anointed him as king, but did that mean everything fell into place instantly? No. In fact, the moment he stepped into his calling, the opposition increased. David had to run for his life. He had to hide in caves. He had to fight battles that weren't his fault. At any point, he could have given up. He could have looked at the resistance and assumed, maybe I heard God wrong. Maybe I'm not meant to be king. But that wasn't true. The battle wasn't a sign that he was lost. It was a sign that he was almost there. And maybe that's exactly where you are. The enemy attacks what he fears. Have you ever noticed that the closer you get to something good, the harder things seem to get? That's not a coincidence. It's resistance. Marcus thought the rejections were a sign that he should quit. That God wasn't opening doors because maybe he wasn't supposed to walk through them. But what if the very reason he was facing so much opposition was because he was on the verge of something greater? The enemy doesn't attack what isn't a threat. If you were close to something powerful, you wouldn't be facing so much pushback. And that means one thing: this is not the time to quit. What to do when the battle gets harder? If you're in a season where everything seems to be coming against you, don't let it make you doubt your path. Let it confirm that you're walking in the right direction. Marcus didn't know it yet, but his breakthrough was right around the corner. The job that had rejected him? It wasn't the right one. But the one coming next? It would be the opportunity he had been waiting for all along. So, if the battle is intense right now, take heart. It means you're closer than you think. And whatever you do, don't give up now. Have you ever faced unexpected opposition? Are you in that battle right now? Drop a comment and say, "I will not give up." Because sometimes, the act of declaring it is the first step toward victory. Sign number 5, you feel a sense of expectancy. Sarah sat on a park bench, watching the golden light of the setting sun stretch across the sky. Lately, she had been seeing signs everywhere, Bible verses that spoke directly to her situation, strangers offering words of encouragement at just the right time, opportunities appearing when she least expected them. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stirring in her spirit. A quiet whisper telling her something big was coming. When you sense that change is near. Have you ever had that feeling? That deep, unshakable knowing inside you that something is shifting? You can't explain it, but you can feel it. Maybe you keep seeing the same number patterns, hearing the same message from different people, or feeling a sudden urge to step into something new. Maybe, like Sarah, you just feel a growing anticipation in your heart, like the air before a storm, electric, alive, full of possibility. And here's the truth. When God is about to do something big in your life, He often gives you glimpses of it first. Not as a coincidence. Not as wishful thinking. But as confirmation. Moses and the signs before the Exodus. Think about Moses. Before leading the Israelites out of Egypt, he saw undeniable signs that something was about to change. The burning bush. The miracles. The plagues. Every event pointed toward a shift, a breakthrough, a divine move of God. But the signs alone weren't enough. Moses had to act on them. He had to trust that what he was seeing wasn't just random events, but divine direction. And the same goes for you. Are you paying attention? What if God has been showing you signs, but you've been too distracted, too doubtful, or too afraid to recognize them? Sarah didn't realize it at first, but when she looked back, she saw how everything had been aligning. The job loss that led her to a new passion. The friendships that ended to make room for better ones. The closed doors that guided her to the right path. What if, right now, God is already revealing His plan for you, piece by piece? The question is, will you recognize it? Preparing for what's coming. When you sense something is shifting, don't ignore it. Lean into it. If God is placing a dream in your heart, start preparing for it. If you feel called to move in a new direction, take the first step. If He's bringing the right people into your life, open your heart to receive them. Because when God gives you glimpses of what's coming, it's not just for you to notice, it's for you to get ready. Are you ready? Sarah didn't know exactly what was ahead, but she chose to believe that whatever God was preparing was greater than what she was leaving behind. And you have the same choice. So tell me, have you been feeling a sense of expectancy? Do you feel like something big is on the horizon? Drop a comment and say, "I'm ready, Lord." Because sometimes, declaring your faith is the first step toward walking into your breakthrough. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. If you've made it this far, it's not by accident. Maybe, just maybe, God wanted you to hear this today. Because these signs, they aren't just stories. They aren't just moments in someone else's life. They are real, and they are happening to you right now. Maybe everything in your life is falling apart, and you don't understand why. Maybe God feels silent, and you're questioning if He's even listening. Maybe He's calling you to let go of something, and you're afraid of what's next. Or maybe you're facing opposition so strong that you wonder if you should just give up. But here's what I need you to know: God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't remove things from your life without purpose. He doesn't allow struggles without meaning. Every delay, every setback, every closed door is not the end. It's the beginning. And if you feel that shift happening, if you sense something greater on the horizon, trust it. Because when God is about to do something big, He lets you know. So let me ask you, do you see these signs in your own life? Do you feel God moving? If so, comment below, "I see it, Lord." Let's fill this space with faith. And if this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Someone out there is praying for clarity, for hope, for a sign. Share this video with them. You might be the answer to their prayer. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. If you haven't already, subscribe to Grace Bible Stories and stay connected as we walk through faith, hope, and transformation together. God is moving. The question is, are you ready?